Hey there, welcome to My Green Pets. I'm William Green. A couple years ago, I made a video about my favorite landscaping plants that I used at this property, and I planted a lot of these things in 2016, 2017. So I'm gonna do another episode of this landscape video so you can see how the plants have grown and changed. It's now spring of 2023, and a lot of things that I wanted to show you in bloom at that time I couldn't, so we're gonna go ahead and jump in. I'm gonna try to go in the same order, but I'm gonna try also not to talk as much about each plant and just try to show you more. So one plant that did not get mentioned in the previous video was this. This is a American witch hazel, Hamamelis virginiana, I believe. And this plant, what I like about witch hazels is that they bloom in the winter. So this is an American witch hazel, and they typically bloom in November, December, very, very, very end of the year, depending on how cold it is. And the blooms are these little yellow ribbons that come off the plant, and they are fragrant. This plant has not grown very quickly because I think I just kind of actually figured it out recently. The area that it's growing in, this is kind of a hill, and it gets very dry. You can see the grass around it is kind of turning brown, so it needs more moisture. I think that's the reason it hasn't grown very fast. But it is a cool little plant, and I like native plants. So Virginia witch hazel, late in the year bloomer, and kind of a cool plant. All right, now another couple of shrubs I wanted to show you. This is old gold juniper, and when I bought these things, they were about this big. I mean, like this sprig. They looked like this in the pot. That was it. And it's been, well, since 2016, so we're 2023. So 9 years, no, 7 years, and they've gotten quite big. I've had to cut them back several times, but the new growth, it's called old gold because the new growth has got this yellow on it, and definitely a nice kind of plant to have on either side of this stairway. And in front of them, kind of to complement the old gold, these are falsecypress, and they also have that kind of thread-like look to them, yellow new growth, and pretty slow growing, but definitely nice little shrubs to have. All right, now the centerpiece of the front yard of this property is this purple smoke tree. Isn't it magnificent? I got this guy at Lowe's Home Improvement in their landscaping section, and it was about, I don't know, 2-3 feet tall when I bought it. I would venture to say that this plant has pretty much maxed out in terms of size. So you can see it's quite big, maybe 20 feet tall, maybe even a little taller than that. And what's so attractive about it is I guess they are the flowers, but they look like little puffs of smoke. Here's one a little closer. Isn't that cool? Now these are very drought tolerant, so if you have a kind of drier situation, it will grow just fine. It doesn't like soggy areas. Definitely prefers more dry areas, but the leaves are beautiful. In the spring, they come out this fiery reddish orange color. It has fall color as well. The leaves are kind of this interesting round shape, and I just love this thing. It's so nice. Smoke tree. Next to it, we've got tigerized sumac. This is a cutleaf sumac, and you can see it's called cutleaf because the leaves have these little notches cut out the sides of them, and it is just this lovely, brilliant kind of neon green color. And sumacs are suckering plants, and they will send out runners, so you might see new ones coming up. Actually, here's one in the yard coming up right here. So it gives you an example of how far away the suckers can travel underground. But the good thing is, if if it's an area that's mowed regularly, then you're just gonna mow over them and they're fine. The stems are actually quite weak. You can just kind of push them and crack them off. It's not a particularly difficult plant to pull out if you're wanting to get rid of it, but I really like it because it has such a sculptural quality. I mean, this old branch is dead, but it's got new growth coming out the bottom, and with the two leafed branches on the sides, kind of has a cool, almost like a bonsai look to it. So I like to leave the dead parts on there. But I think it's really cool, and the color goes really well with the smoke tree here. Apologize, it's a busy road next to this. So, Cutleaf, tiger-eye sumac. Now, right on the corner here, we have what is called a white yucca, and it's in full bloom right now with 3 bloom spikes. And these are pollinated by moths. They're kind of fragrant at night and just very cool. Now, I have not done a very good job of clearing out the grass that's growing in between it. They look a lot nicer when you kind of clean them out. It is a bit of work because you can't, it takes some maintenance to get in there, but they're very cool plants. They like hot, dry areas, and they can kind of be like a showpiece. Now, if you watched the previous video from 2 years ago, you'll notice that where these 2 bare spots are, there were 2 huge 35 to 40 foot tall Colorado blue spruces. And what happened was, first of all, in the hot, humid south where I'm located, even though this is the upper south, it's too hot, it's too humid, and these plants get fungus infections that causes the needles to drop. Not only that, it doesn't really get cold enough for them in the winter, and these plants were kind of already declining. So what happened was we got a really, really rainy spring and high winds, and so it pushed both of them over. Not completely, but they had to come out. So unfortunately, those 2 magnificent trees are gone. The good thing is, it gives me kind of a blank canvas to put some new stuff. So I went shopping the other day at Bates Nursery near Nashville, Tennessee. And at Bates, I was able to find a pink dogwood that is a cross between the native dogwood, Cornus florida, and the Korean dogwood, Cornus cosa. So this is stellar pink variety. And it's just supposed to be, it's a hybrid, so it's gonna have vigor. It's gonna be more vigorous grower, and it's supposed to bloom April, May, and there's supposed to be a blush pink color. So I'm really excited to get this guy going, and hopefully it's going to grow well. I really like it when dogwoods kind of develop that tiered look, with multiple levels, kind of a pagoda shape. So we'll see. Hopefully it'll survive. And we'll get some pink flowers in the spring. All right, I'm super excited to be able to show you the Oakleaf hydrangeas. Getting close to full bloom, maybe about 3/4 of the way there, but aren't they fabulous? These are a native plant to the United States, to this North America, and gosh, aren't they wonderful? They really do well in full sun. They do well in moist, even soggy areas, and they reward you with these wonderful panicles of flowers. And the cool thing about these is that after the white fades in a month or 2, it'll kind of fade to a pinkish and then a green color. And then in the winter, it'll stay all winter long as well. They'll be dried, but you'll kind of have like this nice dried flower display on these guys if you want to. They're really easy to cut back. The only thing is that if you cut them back, you may lose some flowers for the following year. So what I typically do is I'll cut half of it back one year, and then I'll cut the other half back the following year. So I always have flowers, and believe it or not, these are full size, so they can get like 8 or 9 feet tall and as wide. There are also miniature varieties that you can get that only get about 5 feet. So good to have in a landscape. I love these Oakleaf hydrangeas. Another hydrangea that is great for sunny spaces is the Limelight hydrangea, and this one you can tell it's going to bloom quite a bit later than the Oakleaves. You'll remember from the previous video there was a big yew bush here, and I mentioned that I would never have planted that yew. It was here with the property when it was purchased. Yews get huge and you have to trim them constantly, but this guy is going to fill in the space nicely. You can see that there are buds already on it, so I would expect in a month or so we'll see this guy in full bloom, just as these are kind of fading. So that'll be a nice progression. And this little arborvitae, I have a couple different types of arborvitae in the yard. This is a woodward globe. I just trimmed it yesterday, so you can see there's still some marks where I trimmed it, but it has a nice spherical shape. I went ahead and trimmed it because I wanted to kind of get the shape, get the size of the plant under control. This can also get quite big. It can get 8 to 10 feet tall if you just leave it to do its thing. So I wanted to try to manage it. Arborvitaes, you have to be careful because you cannot trim them back to the brown part. If you do, it will never grow back. You can only trim it back as far as you have green growth. So that's something to keep in mind. So I probably could have taken it back a few more inches, but that's where it is for now. Also mentioned in my last video, the Jelena witch-hazel, which has a gorgeous shape. Lovely, lovely shape. Blooms in January and February in the winter. Bright orange thread-like blooms hang off of it, covering the branches. You can actually see the buds. These are the buds for the flowers that will eventually bloom in winter. Really nice leaves, and the bark is like a silver color. It's like a shiny silvery, almost looks spray painted. It's super cool. The only negative point about this is that it is a grafted plant. So it's Jelena witch-hazel grafted on top of the Native American Virginia witch-hazel. And so it often will push suckers up out the bottom, and a couple times a year I have to get around there and trim the suckers down, which I hate doing. And I do not like grafts for that reason. So if you can find one that's not grafted, I would highly suggest that. Next to it, we've got the Carolina Allspice. This is Calycanthus Hartlage wine. It's a cross, it's a sterile cross. It produces enormous flowers. We'll get to look at one in a second. And you can see it is a huge plant. This is another one of those plants where you buy it. I think it was like 6 inches tall when I bought it, just a little stick. And several years later, it has gotten enormous. I do trim it back every few years, but I kind of just manage it. You know, I don't want to, for a few years there, I was cutting it all the way back, letting it grow again, cutting it back, grow again. But from now, you know, it wants to be big, and it's okay. It shades the house. You know, this is the south side of the house, so it gets very hot on this side, so why not have some shade? I like it. And the flowers are pretty nice. Check this out. Okay, there we go. Aren't these nice? Another tree that has grown significantly since I got it is the Korean dogwood, Cornus. And you can tell that this one's never been pruned. Sometimes people prune their dogwoods to give them kind of a pagoda type shape. I've just kind of let this one go. I figure if I want to prune it someday, I can. But it's been really dry the past couple weeks, and you can tell this plant has dropped a lot of leaves. I'm really hoping that that's nothing more. I definitely have checked out the trunk and the branches and stuff, and I haven't seen any evidence of disease or cankers. These are actually supposed to be disease resistant. So I'm hoping it's just the dry spell. Most of the leaves look okay. It's kind of random how some of them have dropped. So I'm just, you know, like these are fine, but then the ones below it have turned crispy. So we will see, we will see. Hopefully it's going to be okay. I do want to show you the flowers are just about done, but these are what the flowers look like. So you can imagine when the whole tree is covered in these, it's quite nice. And then in the fall, these flower heads turn in these pink berries, which is really cool. They are edible, but I think we're just gonna leave them for the birds. Korean dogwood. And this is gonna continue to grow a little bit taller and wider. I mentioned the burning bush in my last video, not a native plant and is actually somewhat invasive, so I wouldn't plant this again if I had known that. But something that's important to realize is that this is the dwarf burning bush, okay? Dwarf. It is not exactly a dwarf, and it will continue to get even bigger. So make sure that if you're looking for plants to fill up spaces and you find dwarf burning bush, that you realize this is dwarf. All right, so the last video that I made, I showed you the Chicago hardy fig, and that plant is now gone. It was absolutely out of control. It just kept, every year it would just put out tons and tons of growth. It would be 12 feet tall by the end of the season, and it was crazy. So I replaced the Chicago hardy fig with something that I had been wanting but just didn't have a place for it. This is another native plant. This is the sweet bay magnolia, Magnolia virginiana, and I love it. It is so great. It is, first of all, it's native, so it's survived our winter no problem. You can see how robust the growth is. Last summer when we planted it, it was just 3 sticks coming out of the ground, and it has absolutely done great. I don't have any flowers on it at the moment, but it blooms in spring and throughout the summer, more sporadically throughout the summer, but you get more in spring. And it's already bloomed in its second year. I think that we've had 6 so far. You can see here's another bud on the way. Oh yeah, that's gonna be cracking open, maybe even later today. And they are so fragrant. They smell so powerful, sweet, floral, strong, heady fragrance. It's really, really nice. So, sweet bay magnolia, I'm glad to have you. I'm glad to be rid of the Chicago hardy fig. That thing was just not, it wasn't pretty. It didn't have a lot of redeeming qualities. It did produce fruit, but meh. All right, this is Venus sweet shrub. It's another type of calycanthus, another type of Carolina allspice hybrid. It's taken years. I got this little guy off of Amazon. It's just, again, like a little, like a little stick about this big. And it's taken it years to get some size on it. It has really nice little white flowers. I'm trying to see. Well, here's a bud on it. But the flowers are similar to the Heartledge wine, only they're white with a little red ring around the center. So they're kind of cool. And I haven't done a whole lot of pruning on this guy. I know he looks kind of leggy, but I really want him to get well rooted and established and happy before I start pruning on him too much. So Venus sweet shrub, another flowering shrub with cute little fragrant white flowers. They're not that small. They're probably about this big. Okay, look at these guys. America's largest native fruit is 2 pawpaw trees. They're loaded with fruit this year. I love pawpaw. They are so exotic looking. They have this wonderful pyramidal shape that they just grow naturally. They've never been pruned. This is just how they've naturally grown. And they produce fruit. Here's a couple of them right here. And the fruit's usually ready in September. So these have got some months to go, but there's more over here. You can see. Boom. So they're really cool. And yeah, they're native trees. Usually they're growing in thickets and forests, so they're kind of leggy, but when you give them full sun, they develop into this wonderful shape. All right, next to it, we've got my Tupelo tree. I went on and on and on and on about Tupelo in my last video. After going to Bates Nursery in Nashville, now I kind of wish that I had done a little bit more research about the varieties of Tupelo. I just bought the first one that I found at my local garden center, but I'm going to show you this video that I took at Bates of this cultivar of Tupelo called Wildfire. So the Latin name is Nyssa sylvatica. Wildfire is the cultivar, and the new growth comes out brilliant, bright red, and then in the fall, the fall color is again this outstanding fire engine red on this cultivar. This one, planted in my yard, I don't know if it's a special cultivar or not. I don't know anything about it. I know that it's Tupelo. I know that it's Nisa sylvatica, but I don't know anything else. It does produce fruit, and these are unripe. They'll be ripe in the fall. They'll be like a dark purple color, and they're very sour. You can try to eat them, but again, best left for the birds. And this plant is a slow growing tree, so it's not going to, you know, it's going to grow a couple feet every year, but they can max out at 60, 70 feet tall, especially in an urban environment. So hopefully that's not going to happen for a long time. But I did plant it way out here in the yard, so it had plenty of space to spread. It might end up shading the pawpaws one day, but that's okay because they can handle that. Love my Tupelo. The last video I didn't say much about crepe myrtle, but I got a lot of comments about talk more about crepe myrtle. Well, I don't really know what to say other than in Zone 6 where I live, or where these plants live. I'm sorry, I used to live in Zone 6. Crepe myrtles can get pretty big, but it takes a long time. These crepe myrtles are probably, they're many decades old. Decades. But yeah, I mean, stick them in the ground in a sunny location, make sure they get adequate moisture, and they'll just take off. And then they bloom in late summer. This past winter, the temperatures got down to like -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Very, very cold. So they're kind of coming out a little slow this year, but I think they're gonna make it, and we'll get blooms on them later in the year. Okay, we've got the Bonanza peaches right here in front of us. You can buy these at a lot of garden centers. The Bonanza peaches, they come as, you know, tiny little things, and you can see they get pretty big. I'm about 6 feet tall, and this is where I come up to on the tree. So you can see it's got that much more to go. And I was not able to show you any fruit last time, but this time I think there are peaches that I can show you. If we can look in here somewhere. Where are you, peaches? I saw one. Ah, there we go. You can see some in here. And a robin's nest too. So these will produce quite a bit of fruit. The problem is keeping them from the squirrels. Keeping the squirrels out of them. The squirrels will take all of these fruit while they're still green. So, aren't those nice? I love them. All right, this hedge I also didn't talk about in the last video. This is a type of euonymus, and this is another one of these things that was here when the house was purchased. I would never plant this as a hedge. It's stringy, it's lanky, it's invasive, and it's not particularly good looking either. But I just trimmed it yesterday to try to like keep it under control. And I mean, it does serve a purpose as a privacy fence. I pulled out one of them a few years ago when I planted that second, the closest crepe myrtle to us. And it was a big ordeal trying to get that thing out of the, I had to get a chainsaw. The roots were huge. It was a huge pain. I would never plant this. I would plant something like maybe green giant arborvitae or something like that to create a nice hedge that doesn't require any maintenance. This has to be trimmed every year. All right, finally we've got a little group of arborvitae. These were on sale at the end of the season for I think $3.99 a piece. And they have grown quite nicely. Again, these were planted in 2016. It's now 2023, and they are getting to be what I wanted them to be, which is a nice privacy screen just for this area against the neighbor's house. You can see the ones in the background. Those are more full-size adult plants, so they still have quite a bit to go, but they're definitely getting there. And my nephew loves the way that they're planted because he likes running in around them like a maze. So if I were, you know, arborvitae has a great function and is a beautiful shrub slash tree, but when people plant them in a straight line, it's kind of cringy. You know, try to plant them in a somewhat more attractive way than just a straight line of them. It's not good. It's not good. All right, that's my opinion. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, checking on my green pets. These are my landscape pets, and I will see you next time. Take care.